This is the Harry Loomis Show. Welcome back here to the Harry Loomis Show, and it is one of the most exciting times of the year, in my opinion. NHL training camps are set to start this week. Preseason action starts, I believe, on Saturday. I know I'm excited. I live in Columbus now. My St. Louis Blues will play in Columbus for a preseason game next Wednesday, and I will be in attendance, so I cannot wait to get back to hockey. I've really got the itch right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of the divisions and kind of give my guess on how I think they're going to go 1 through 8. I already did the Metropolitan Division a couple weeks back on the Harry Loomis Show. A refresher, I had the order going: Rangers, Devils, Hurricanes, Capitals, Islanders, Penguins, Flyers, and then Blue Jackets rounding out the division. And one thing I want to say, I have not commented on the passings of Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Gaudreau just yet. It was a shock to everyone in the NHL world. It's an unbelievable tragedy. Gaudreau was one of my favorite players growing up, a guy that was undersized and was just so unbelievably talented that he wrote off every single criticism about him. It was never an issue with his game. It was never an issue with his character. All that people had against him was his size, and he proved everyone wrong and had really just an unbelievable career for a fourth round pick. My heart goes out to him, the Gaudreau family, his close friends, including guys like Sean Monahan and Kevin Hayes, who were very, very good friends. Monahan came to Columbus to play with Gaudreau once again, and Kevin Hayes I feel terrible for. Having lost his brother Jimmy Hayes a couple years ago, now losing one of his best friends, two of his best friends, in Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau. My heart goes out to the Gaudreau family. I hope they're doing well in this unimaginable time. I couldn't imagine anything worse than this, so I really do hope that the family is doing okay. So, like I said, I did do the Metropolitan Division, and I meant to do one division at a time, and I kind of just got off track of that, so that's my apologies for that. So we're going to go through all the divisions here today, and I'm going to rank them where I think they're going to finish 1 through 8. Starting with the Atlantic Division, and I think this could go one of three ways, honestly. Any of the top three teams from last year, in my opinion, could win it. But I have the defending champion Florida Panthers once again winning this division. I still think they are arguably the best team in the National Hockey League. They're as deep as anyone. And if Bobrovsky gives them good goaltending once again, there's no reason why they can't repeat as division champions. Whether they'll make it back to the final, that's to discuss at another time. In second, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think the addition of Craig Berube is really going to bring in a different play style for them. I think they're going to be a much more physical team. Obviously, this is the last year of Mitch Marner. I'm really curious to see how they mesh together. But I think the Leafs could use a little bit of grit and sandpaper. We know they have the high-end talent. I think if they put it all together, they could have a pretty solid bounce-back season. In third, I have the Bruins, and I am making this pick. I thought about putting them as the division champions, but right now, Jeremy Swayman remains unsigned. Don Sweeney's on record saying he hopes to have a contract in place by December 1st, which is the deadline. But the fact that it's even to this point is a disaster. They traded Olmark. You need to sign Swayman. I don't know what's taken them so long. Obviously, there's a bit of an impasse with the contract, but I think that this has not been handled well at all. I don't like the Zadorov contract. I don't like the Elias Lindholm contract at all, but I still think they will be a playoff team pretty safely. In fourth, I'm actually going to go with the Detroit Red Wings because, yes, they lost some pieces. David Perron, Shane Gostisbehere, among others. They got Patrick Kane back. They brought in a sniper in Vladimir Tarasenko, and this team just needs to build on what they have. They have the pieces. They have the core. They were a terrible month away from being a playoff team pretty safely. I think they can build on that. I like where they're at a lot more than I like where teams like the Senators and the Sabres are at, because we saw the progression this year. We saw them fight for a playoff spot tooth and nail until the very end. The Sabres got close in 23. The Senators haven't been anywhere near that. I think this is the year that the Detroit Red Wings will be back in the playoffs, and I think they're going to be the number 4 seed in the Atlantic. At the number 5 seed, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning. Obviously, you lost Steven Stamkos, the best player in franchise history. Victor Hedman's now your captain. Losing Mikhail Sergachev, I think, was a tough blow as well. You did bring in Jake Gensel. I just don't think this Lightning team has the juice that it had a couple years ago. We might be starting to see the beginning of the end of what was an incredibly successful around decade or so for the Bolts. In sixth, I have the Senators ahead of the Sabres. I think that the pieces are there. I think they're going to make some improvements this year. I don't love the Travis Green hire all that much, but I love the Linus Ullmark trade. I think that's the biggest win out of any of these bottom teams in this offseason. In seventh, I have the Sabres. I think they're right there with the Senators. They could reach, a 90-point plateau high mark, or they could crater and be around a 500 team. It's really hard to say with them, but I don't like the Lindy Ruff signing either. They obviously have talents like Rasmus Dahlin, who's one of my favorite defensemen in the league. I think Bowen Byron will continue to improve. I think Owen Powell will continue to improve. If you can get Tage Thompson healthy, that's a win. Losing Jeff Skinner hurts as well. I just don't see the Sabres getting out of this skid that they're in. I don't see this being the year that they get back into the playoff conversation. Unfortunately, to say that fan base deserves it. And rounding out the division once again, I have the Montreal Canadiens, but I think they are pretty easily the best eighth ranked team in a division. There's a lot to like with this Habs team. They're just very, very young, very raw, but I think give them a couple years and they're just going to continue to flourish. I like a lot of their young guys. I like Suzuki. I like Slavkovsky. I like Lane Hudson. I like Caulfield. Logan Mailloux looks pretty promising as well. Give the Habs a couple years and they will be very dangerous. And they just got Patrick Laine. I'm really curious to see how that works. But that's how I have the Atlantic playing out. Panthers, Leafs, Bruins, Wings, Lightning, Senators, Sabres, and Canadiens rounding it out. And next, we're going to move on to the Central Division. I still think the Dallas Stars are the best team in the Central. They might be the best team in all the West. Haven't made my playoff predictions, but there's a good chance they could be making another deep run. Peter DeBoer, obviously, I still have questions about him, but he's gotten this team to the conference finals the last 2 years. Signing Thomas Harley was a good move. I don't love some of the moves they made in the offseason with Ilya Lyubushkin and Matt Dumba, but I'm going to be curious to see how they continue to develop throughout the year. Jason Robertson is going to be out for most of training camp. We'll see if that slows him down at the start of the season. But this team has so much firepower, they should be okay at the end of the day. In second, I have the Colorado Avalanche. This obviously, like I said, isn't the team that the Avs had a couple years ago when they won the Stanley Cup. But you still have Nathan McKinnon. You still have Kyle McCarr. You still have Mikko Rantanen. If you get passable goaltending from Alex Georgiev and you get health, as long as you don't have any massive injuries, maybe you get Landeskog back this year. If Kyle McCarr plays 80 games this year, they will be just fine. I still think this offense has too much firepower to totally fall off. I think bringing Casey Middlestad in last year was a really good move as well. In third place, I have the Nashville Predators, a team that did more than anybody else in the offseason. Their window is short. Jonathan Marchessault, Steven Stamkos, Brady Shea are not young by any means, but these are moves they had to make right now to try to get back into conversation in the Central Division. Love what Barry Trotz is doing. Andrew Brunette is a very good coach as well. They will be very competitive this year. In fourth, I have the Jets, but I thought about a couple different teams in this spot. The vibe just doesn't feel right in Winnipeg. They had a great year in the regular season last year, crashed and burned in the first round, getting manhandled by Colorado. Hellebuck might still be the best goalie in the league, but you lost Bonus. It just doesn't feel like things are at a good spot right now for Winnipeg. I don't know what the issue is, but it just felt like they had so much momentum in the regular season, and then it all fell apart. It's the second year that happened. They had a pretty good start in 23 as well. Crashed and burned. Bonus called a lot of people out. Blake Wheeler was gone. They still have talent. Nikolai Ehlers is still here somehow. There was a lot of rumors that he was going to get traded. I don't know what's going on in Winnipeg. They could still be, a top 3 team in this division, but I wouldn't be surprised if they dropped all the way to 6th and weren't even in the playoff conversation. That's how uncertain it is right now. In 5th place, I put my St. Louis Blues. There's a lot of polarizing takes on this Blues team for this year. I think they will be pretty much where they were last year. I think they did get a little bit better. I like the Joseph acquisition, Matthew Joseph. I love what they did with getting Broberg and Holloway. I think those are bold moves that you had to take. You lost Scandella, Krug's out for the year. So bringing in guys like Suter, P.O. Joseph, and Philip Broberg on the left side, I think were necessary. I hope Scott Perunovich continues to develop. Bringing Buchnevich on giving him a 6-year contract, I think is a good move. The biggest question for the Blues right now is Jordan Kyrou. whether he can return to his 2022 form, because it hasn't been the same the past couple of years. Obviously, there is a lot going on. Him and Berube might not have had the best relationship, but if he can just put his head down, go to work, continue to work on his defensive game, and get back to being that 75-point player, there's going to be a lot less heat on his shoulders for that 8-year, $8.125 million contract. So I have the Blues at number 5. I thought about putting them at 4, but I'm going to play it safe and keep them at 5. At 6, I have Utah. I think Utah made a lot of good moves this offseason. I love the Mikhail Sergachev move more than anything. I think Sergachev could be he has top 10 defenseman in the league potential, but he was playing behind Victor Hedman. Now he is the guy for the Coyotes. Him and Sean Durzi could be a really interesting top line there. So I think that this could be a year that Utah makes a step. I also thought about having them at 4. I think the Blues, the Jets, and Utah will all be very close between 4, 5, and 6. And it'll be really interesting to see at the end of the season who out of them, if there's a wild card spot available, who ends up taking it, because I think it could be 4-4 once again on the West Coast. In 7th, I have the Wild. Kind of the same thing, just doesn't feel like things are going very well there. Matt Boldy, Brock Faber, Kaprizov, they have really good pieces there, but until they finish up eating the cap recapture penalties on Suter and Parise, just doesn't feel like there's a lot of opportunity for them to compete. Just kind of a tough spot for the Wild to be in. And then rounding out the division, I have the Chicago Blackhawks, who will get better. Bedard will continue to improve. I like the Bertuzzi addition. I think that the Blackhawks will improve from a 50-point team to being borderline a 70-point team. But like the Canadians, they are a couple years away. So that's how I see the Central Division going. Stars, Avalanche, Predators, Jets, Blues, Utah, Wild, and Blackhawks. Last up is the Pacific Division, and I'm not going to be too controversial here. I am with a lot of people thinking that the Edmonton Oilers will win this division. They did a lot this offseason. Obviously, they lost Broberg and Holloway when the Blues signed them for the offer sheets, but bringing in guys like Victor Arvidsson, Jeff Skinner, getting Matt Savoy somehow from Buffalo. Don't know how they were able to pull off that trade. This team could score 5 goals a game, and I wouldn't be surprised. The firepower that they have is just ridiculous right now, and their defense has gotten better. Bouchard's really taken some steps, more of an offensive defenseman, but I still love guys like Matthias Ekholm on the back end as well. The big question here is going to be goaltending. Can Stuart Skinner continue to step it up? He had some really good moments in that cup run that almost won them a Stanley Cup. Can he continue to be that guy for a large majority of the season? If so, the Oilers could easily win the President's Trophy this year. Second place, I have Vancouver, a team that shocked a lot of people last year and won that division. I still think they'll be a very good team. I don't know if, one, they won't surprise people as much this year, and two, I don't think they'll reach quite the highs they reached last year. Felt like everything went right for them. And also, Thatcher Demko is going to be out for some of this season. He's battling a knee injury still. Can Artur Silovs step up and take an increased role? He didn't have great numbers last year, but he did have some good moments, especially in that Nashville series. What side of him are we going to get? The Canucks have a really good core. Quinn Hughes is one of the best defensemen in the league. That offense, that top 6 in particular, is unfair. Well, curious to see how Brock Besser comes back from his blood clot issues that took him out of the playoffs last year. Can Elias Pettersson step up? Can JT Miller continue to be just an absolute dynamo at the center spot? There's a lot to like with this Canucks team. At third, I have the Golden Knights, who I don't think are nearly as potent as they were in years past. They definitely don't have cup run potential to me like they did 2 years ago. I think this team is around a first to second round team. I don't, they brought in a guy like Noah Hannafin last year. They signed him. They got guys like Tomas Hertl. It feels like this team is just getting pretty old, pretty fast, and it feels like time might be running out on them. But I still like Bruce Cassidy as a coach. I'm curious to see how Aiden Hill does in an increased role now that Logan Thompson is gone in Washington. But a lot of question marks with the Knights as well as with the 4th place team, the LA Kings. Obviously, the big move for them was getting rid of Pierre-Luc Dubois. They brought in Warren Fogle, lost Victor Arvidsson in free agency, so basically a trade with the Kings. But it felt like there was a lot of momentum with the Kings last year. They were another team like Winnipeg, where it felt like they had a lot of momentum. Then they fell apart. They fired Todd McClellan, and they stumbled into the playoffs. You knew they were going to crash and burn, and they got manhandled by the Oilers. Not much of a surprise there. They got new jerseys, they got new logo and everything like that. I think they look good, but the team that is donning them is interesting. There's a lot to like, and there's a lot to dislike with this team. They're really on the borderline whether or not I think they're going to make the playoffs. They'll be battling for a wild card spot, but I don't know how the dice are going to roll for the LA Kings. In fifth, I have Seattle. I think last year was a bit of a step back. Dan Bylsma as a coach, I'm not sure how I feel about that. This team should be at least a mid 80s, low 90s point team. I think the talent is there. Can Shane Wright break into the lineup this year? I think it's going to be the big question. Will Matty Benier come back from a pretty down second year? Really interesting to see what the Kraken are going to be able to do. Obviously, they're not in the position that the Knights were in their fourth year, but this should be a team that could compete for a playoff spot. And then that's really all the competitive teams you have in the Pacific Division. 6, 7, 8 are going to be pretty bad. They could all be tanking or going for that first pick next year. In sixth, I do have Anaheim. They shocked me taking Beckett Seneca third overall. I thought it was going to be right around a 10th overall pick, and then all of a sudden, last second, he jumps up to number 3. Their jerseys look sick. That's the biggest thing, but you need to see some development. They've got all these young pieces: Leo Carlson, Mason McTavish, Trevor Zegras. This is a team that we keep thinking should be able to kind of turn a corner this year, start to be a little bit more competitive. They have flashes a couple games at a time where they look really good, but it's just not sustained. John Gibson, too. You thought he was going to get traded. He's still here as well. I don't know what the plan is for him. Lucas Dostal looked pretty good in his role last year. What's the goalie situation there? I just want to see this team be competitive. I want to see them compete for even a 500 record. If they're another mid to low 70 point team, something needs to be seriously considered. They need to consider some massive changes because they just can't keep kicking the can down the road and hope something's going to change, because right now it doesn't look like it's going to. In seventh, I have the Flames, who are in a full-on rebuild right now. They're selling off as much as they can, kind of doing what they have to do, given the position that they were in when they lost Johnny Gaudreau, when they lost Matthew Tkachuk. You kind of knew the writing was on the wall. They got a pretty good return for Jacob Markstrom, and I think it's going to be a couple years of pain, but hopefully they hit on some draft picks and they get some good return on investment. But for now, this is going to be a tough stretch for Calgary Flame fans. And last but not least, I have the Sharks. I thought about putting the Flames behind the Sharks just because it seems like the Sharks are on an upward trajectory and the Flames are on a downward. But you have to remember that the Flames had 81 points last year and the Sharks only had 47, which is the lowest in an 82-game schedule since probably the early 2000s. I think maybe one of the early Atlanta Thrashers teams might have had worse than that. But there is a lot to like with the Sharks team going forward. I think Macklin Celebrini should have a pretty solid rookie year. Same with Will Smith. Those two guys you're going to have to pay a lot of attention to. I think that could be a pretty special combo to come up in the next few years. But they're still a little bit away from being anywhere near competitive like Chicago, like Anaheim. If they can just improve, they didn't even hit 50 points this year. If they can at least get, mid 60s, low 70s even, you'd be happy with that. You just need to start seeing development where you can. So that's how I have the Pacific Division going: Oilers, Canucks, Knights, Kings, Kraken, Ducks, Flames, and Sharks. So those are all my division picks. Let me know what you guys think. We'll be back next week to do more previews for the season. I'll give you my award picks, maybe some hipster picks as well, my Stanley Cup pick and all of that. I cannot wait for hockey season. I hope you guys are ready too. We will talk to you again soon. This is the Harry Loomis Show.